In watching the three memorial services for ex-President Ronald Reagan and all of the formality that went with them, I found myself strangely touched more than once. There are moments when I had a lump in my throat, a very large one. And I thought it was altogether fitting to have such a memorial for one of the really great presidents of the greatest and most powerful nation the world has ever known. People will argue about Reagan's place in history. It's folly, I think, to try to rank the presidents as many people do. They have this top 10 and tiers and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, presidents all face different situations in different worlds. I mean, when you think about it, Washington, his situation was unique. No other president would ever face his challenges. No other president would have to do what he had to do. Abraham Lincoln's challenges were unique. No one ever before, and hopefully no one ever again, will have to face the kind of challenges that Abraham Lincoln faced. And you can't compare presidents who had no particular challenge within their entire presidency with presidents who did. But one thing I think comes out clearly enough, that Ronald Reagan and Franklin Delano Roosevelt were not unique, but they were the greatest presidents of the 20th century, beyond any question. No one else even comes into the ballpark. But my message today is not about the presidents. It's about the greatest, wealthiest, and most powerful nation that has ever existed on this planet. Now, I know in their own days, Greece and Rome were great and powerful. And the British Empire, at its peak, was truly a great empire. And these were nations that created empires. There is, however, no American empire. That is not to say that there could not have been. For we have the wealth, the power, we have had whatever it took to build an empire. We've had it. Americans don't have an empire because Americans have never wanted one. Throughout our history, Americans have mainly wanted to be left alone. Left alone to build families, to build businesses, to go about our lives and to worship our God, to live as we see fit in a free society, in a free country, and we have wanted people to leave us alone, to be left alone to enjoy life. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, and we'll be talking about that, history has not left us alone. And as I watched the greatest nation bury one of her greatest presidents, I was overwhelmed with an awareness of just how great, how wealthy, and how powerful this nation has become. Absolutely nothing could have impressed it upon my mind like watching, and I watched virtually the whole thing from start to finish. Nothing could have impressed upon my mind like that series of memorial services and all of the really beautiful ceremonies that went with it, the heavy seriousness with which we observed this man's life, celebrated his presidency, and thought about the great things that he had done and how he had changed the course of history, in fact, in his presidency. And I guess I had never really I knew we were a great nation. I knew we were the most powerful nation on the face of the planet. But somehow or other, that sequence impressed it upon my mind as nothing I have ever seen before. And you have to realize, those ceremonies were watched around the world for the whole world to see what kind of people we are. And how we treat our dead leaders is a reflection of what kind of people we are. But two questions grew in my mind as I watched all this and thought it through. To what do we owe our greatness as a people? And second, are there any obligations that follow on the heels of that gift of greatness that we have? Now, it's no secret that one of the beliefs that characterized the churches in our tradition in years gone by was often called British Israelism. We should avoid that term. We should avoid it because it's been co-opted by overtly racist organizations and beliefs that we simply do not share. We have nothing in common with them. We do not believe what they believe. We don't follow down that line. And candidly, many of the people who have, like J.H. Allen, who published Judah's Scepter and Joseph's Birthright years ago, in their theories that tried to identify Israel and the trail of Israel down through history, they presented reasons for it that were so easily falsified that I think they did a great disservice to a great truth that is to be known in the world, which I hope to share with you today. Many of the theories that are advanced for the modern identity of Israel are flawed at best and stupid at worst. There is no way to trace the history of Israel through genetics or history with any certainty at all. It's just not possible. It can't be done, and anyone should really know that. For one thing, the blessings of God do not follow strict genetic lines, which is one of the assumptions upon which that's based. And we have in the Bible clear examples of God taking a blessing or a birthright away from one and giving it to another. Now, you can let that can slide by you if you're not careful, and you think in terms of how God's blessing and how God's birthright is passed down through generations. You can forget easily that He sometimes takes it away from one and gives it to another. You probably already know which one I'm talking about if you're very knowledgeable of these things. You'll find the story of it in Romans chapter 9 and verse 6. Romans chapter 9 and verse 6. It's not as though the word of God, Paul said, is of none effect. For they are not all Israel who are of Israel. What a statement. They are not all Israel who are of Israel. Neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children. But in Isaac shall your seed be called. That is, they who are the children of the flesh are not the children of God. Did you read what he just said? Those who are the children of the flesh are not the children of God. So what have you accomplished if you track down through history and think you have found the 10 lost tribes of Israel? Nothing. He says they who are of the flesh are not the children of God. The children of the promise are counted for the seed. For this is the word of promise. At this time I will come, and Sarah shall have a son. And not only this, verse 10, but when Rebekah also had conceived by one, even by her father Isaac, for the children, being not yet born, having done neither good nor evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calls. It was said to her, the elder shall serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. Now, that is really a fascinating thing, because if you go by genetics, the birthright should have gone to Esau, clear and clean. But God, before they were even born, decided it's not going to be that way. I'm going to reverse these two boys. There are more. I could go back and bore you to death with examples in the Bible where God did this sort of thing, but we're not about that today. He says, Paul does, what shall we say then? Is God unrighteous? Is God unfair? God forbid. For he said to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy. I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So then, it is not of him that wills, nor of him that runs, but of God who shows mercy. Now, there's another phrase that goes around amongst people who believe something of this type. It's called manifest destiny. And this phrase also is taken on connotations that none of us should accept, because in some of its manifestations it is frankly, flagrantly racist. And we should have nothing to do with anything like that. But that leaves me with my two questions still unanswered. To what do we owe our greatness as a people? Are there any obligations that go with that greatness and with that power? I said that God can remove birthrights from one and give them to another. Just how far-reaching can this be applied? Now, I want us to go to some words of Jesus, because in this particular passage, it's in Matthew chapter 21. In Matthew chapter 21, we have a statement that Jesus makes which should really bring anyone up short, make all of us start to think in different terms about what's going on. Jesus said in Matthew 21, verse 23, when he came to the temple, the chief priests and elders of the people came to him as he was teaching and said, by what authority do you do these things? Now, it was the Jewish leaders who raised the question of authority, and they're going to get an answer that they did not expect. Jesus answered and said to them, I will ask you one thing, and if you'll tell me this, I likewise will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or was it of men? And they reasoned among themselves, and they're saying, well, if we say from heaven, he will say, well, why didn't you believe him? Good question. But if we say it's of men, well, we're afraid of the people, because they all hold John as a prophet. And they answered Jesus and said, we can't tell. He said to them, well, then neither am I going to tell you by what authority I do these things. But what do you think? Now he's going to pose a question for these gentlemen. And this question is so fundamental to what God has done in history that you must not miss the intent and the import of what Jesus is saying here. What do you think? A certain man had 2 sons. He came to the first and said, son, go today in the vineyard. He answered and said, I'm not going. Afterward, he thought better of himself and went. He came to the second son and said, go do this. And he said, I'll go, sir. And feckless lout that he was, he didn't go. Whither of the 2 did his will of his father? They said to him, the first. And Jesus said to them, verily I say unto you, the publicans and the harlots go into the kingdom of God before you. Tax collectors, crooks, and whores are going into the kingdom of God ahead of you people. You know who he's talking to? He's talking to the chief priests from the temple and the elders of Israel. Now, right here, we can stumble over a term. We have a habit of expecting the Bible to do things that we never do ourselves. We don't always mean precisely the same thing when we use a word or phrase, do we? We use words with a lot of different applications, and sometimes people take us wrong, and we have to try to no, that isn't what I meant this. We understand that with our own conversation. So then we read the Bible, though, and we try to use the Bible that way to where we hold the Bible so strictly to the meaning of a phrase is here, well, it has to mean exactly the same thing over here. Now, you need to break that loose. You need to cut that little tie and get away from it. Normally, some would take this phrase to mean that the publicans and harlots would go to heaven before the priests and elders of Judah. Right? That's the way some people would take it. Or if not heaven, they would take it that, well, they will be in the resurrection in the kingdom of God. But in this context, is that what Jesus is talking about? Read on. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you didn't believe him. But the publicans and the harlots believed him, and you, when you had seen it, did not repent afterward, that you might believe him. Hear another parable. Now, here comes another one. And again, just like the one I just read to you, these are crucial in understanding what this is all about. And understanding why it is that we today are a great nation, as we are, why we have the wealth and the power that we have. From this parable, believe it or not. There was a certain householder which planted a vineyard and hedged it about, and digged a winepress in it, and built a tower, and lent it out to husbandmen, and went to a far country. Did the whole thing. Gave it everything they needed. The men to whom this was given as a responsibility had no lack at all of the quality of the plant, of the tower to do it. All the stuff that had to be done was there for them. He said he went to a far country, and when the time of the fruit drew near, he sent his servants to the husbandmen that they might receive the fruits of it. They were sharecroppers. And the husbandman took his servants, beat one, killed another, and stoned another one. Again, he sent more servants than the first, and they did to them the same thing. Finally, he sent to them his son, saying, they will respect my son. But when the husbandmen saw the son, they said among themselves, here's the heir. We'll kill him and seize his inheritance, and the whole thing will be ours. So they caught him, cast him out of the vineyard, and slew him. Now, Jesus asks the men gathered around him, when the Lord of that vineyard comes, what will he do to those husbandmen? To them, at this point, they hadn't tumbled yet. To them, it was obvious. They said, well, he will miserably destroy those wicked men and let out his vineyard to other husbandmen who shall render them their fruits in their seasons. And Jesus said to them, did you never read in the Scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected, the same is the head of the corner? This is the Lord's doing, and it's marvelous in our eyes. Therefore, I say to you that the kingdom of God shall be taken from you and given to a people bringing forth the fruits thereof. Now, can you take something away from someone that they don't have? Can you take it away from him if he doesn't have it? No. So consequently, what Jesus is saying is, you men have the kingdom of heaven. How can you say that? Well, the word kingdom has a broad application. Basically, it means a realm, it means the government, and in fact, these men held the government of God's people. In a sense, it was the government of God on earth at that time for Israel. And he says to these men, the kingdom of God shall be taken away from you and given to a people who will bring forth the fruit of it. So here we have a clear statement by Jesus that whatever it was that the Jews held of the kingdom of God would be taken away from them and given to someone else entirely. So the whole idea of trying to track genetics on these things gets a little thin when you look at it more carefully. So the kingdom of God cannot be a synonym for going to heaven. It can't even necessarily, in all cases, be a synonym for being in the resurrection. Whosoever shall fall on this stone, the cornerstone, shall be broken. On whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. And when the chief priests and Pharisees heard his parables, they perceived at long last that he spoke about them. And when they sought to lay hands on him, they are afraid of the multitude, because the multitude took him for a prophet. Now, there's a standing joke among Jewish people. You actually hear it in the Fiddler on the Roof. Lord, I know we are the chosen people. But next time, dear Lord, choose someone else. All this arose in my mind as I considered my two questions. To what do we owe our greatness as a people? And are there any obligations that go with that greatness and with that power? As to the first question, it's not so easy to answer. It isn't that we're better people than anybody else. Is there anyone out there that will attribute the greatness of this country that we're better people than other people are? We're a melting pot. We come from all over the world. How could you possibly say such a thing? It isn't that we have more natural resources than anyone else. My word, do you have any idea the resources of this planet? We have this one nation, these 48 states, continental, and of course Alaska and Hawaii. We have all this, and we have to consider, what have we done? Do we have more than anyone else? Far from it. Isn't our country is so big? Well, because I think Canada's bigger than we are in land mass. Well, what is it? Well, once upon a time, there was a man named Abraham. He was a friend of God, and he was chosen of God. Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, God says something extremely important, and something which I do not think is that well understood. The Lord said to Abraham, Genesis 12, verse 1, get out of your country and from your kindred and from your father's house unto a land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great. And you shall be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless you, curse him that curses you, and in you shall all families of the earth be blessed. Now, this is sometimes taken by people as, well, Abraham was a good man. God loved Abraham, and so he gave to him and his seed after him all these wonderful things. And they never give a second thought to the obligations that went with it. That God wasn't just going to hand down wealth and power and strength and influence and all this kind of thing to people as a reward for whatever they had done, what they believed, and what they had been. He gave it to them for a reason having to do with his purpose in the world and with man and what man is doing in the world. I think British Israel makes a huge mistake here. They make too much of Abraham and way too little of God. Let me read this to you again, and I want you to listen carefully to the emphasis. The Lord said to Abraham, get out of your country, from your kindred, your father's house, to a land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless you, and curse you him that curses you, and in you shall all families of the earth be blessed. Abraham was made great by God, but not for his own sake. He wasn't made wealthy so he could eat more. He wasn't made wealthy so he could relax more and be lazier and let his servants do all the work. He wasn't made great and powerful for no reason except to benefit to Abraham. Not at all. It was not because Abraham was a great man either. Abraham was to be made great for God's purpose. Purpose? It's right there in front of your face. You shall be a blessing. In you shall all families of the earth be blessed. Notice it well. Not merely, I will bless you. I will bless you and make your name great so that you can be a blessing. Not just to get a blessing, but to be one. There's a widespread misunderstanding a widespread understanding among the early leaders of this country that this great land was a blessing from God. It's salted throughout their speeches, their writings. You can get the internet and find it for yourself. It's all over the place. They understood. They believed right down from the core of their being, from Washington to Abraham Lincoln and somewhat beyond, that this nation was given as the providence of God handed down to us. And there was in all of these men a sense of obligation that came with the awareness of the blessing. And I think that's fairly natural. That if you really believe that something has been given to you, you feel obliged. You feel a sense of obligation. I have this for a reason. God acts in the world for a reason. And I was struck by the fact that after Ronald Reagan was shot, and after he recovered out of the hospital, he said, I believe that everything God does is for a reason. I think He gave me back my life for things that He wanted me to do. Remarkable man in that sense, a man who, as his son said, did not wear his religion on his sleeve, but those who were close to him knew about it very clearly. That obligation, they also understood that the obligation could not be discarded while the blessing was retained. Now, think about that. What I just said is so important. I want to tell it to you again. These men understood that the obligation could not be discarded while the blessing was retained. Now, again and again in our history, we have befriended and blessed other nations by our power and our wealth. I used to sit back and really marvel at, wonder at, and even disagree with the staggering level of foreign aid we were doing in this country. I didn't understand it. I didn't grasp it. I didn't see, why in the world are we giving these people this money? Leave them on their own. It's not our problem. It's their problem. But there were far-sighted people in this country who said, no, we have an obligation. And we don't know, in some cases, in modern leadership of this country, what they thought about God, but they seem to have clearly seen an obligation for a nation blessed as we have been to help other people. One of the greatest examples in the history of mankind was the Marshall Plan. What other nation has gone back and built back up again a nation that they defeated, as we defeated Germany in World War II? We could have left that nation in absolute rubble. You should see the pictures of their city. They look as bad in some cases as Hiroshima and Nagasaki, without even bothering with atomic weapons there. We bombed that country, those people, into submission, and then drove our armies right through their country, and they were left a broken people. We built them back up again. Why did we do that? Well, the traditions of our country are we were obliged. Where would the world be today, and into what depths of evil would it have plunged if the United States as we know it had not been here? Where would the world be today if we had had Fortress America and been absolutely unwilling to ever move outside our own borders for anything? I think it would have been plunged into terrible depths of darkness. Abraham is not the cause of our blessings, as some theories advance. Abraham is one of the first manifestations of the purpose of God. God is the cause of our blessings. He actually first blessed Abraham and made it clear what He expected of Abraham. And that blessing has passed down through generations of man. The blessings and obligations that were once given to Abraham, where do you suppose they are now? Well, you don't have to look very far. If you want to know where the obligations are, just trundle around and look for the blessings. And you will find that the blessings that God promised Abraham rest upon the English-speaking people of the world today. And therefore, in my opinion, so do the obligations. And they rest upon us not because of our race, not because of who we are, but because of who God is. He has a plan. All that once belonged to Israel now belongs to us. Not just the blessings, but also the obligations. Now, if you ask me if I believe that the English-speaking peoples of the world are the Israel of today, then I will answer, yes. Absolutely, I believe that. I don't believe you can prove it racially, genetically, or historically. But I do believe that you can be persuaded by the blessings and the obligations that we are God's chosen people. And, like the Jews, there may be times when we wish God would choose someone else. Which, again, you're not going to get it. And in fact, you don't want that. I think you can walk through in the Bible the prophecies of the house of Israel at the end time and see the Americans and the British written all over them. Just clear as a bell. Every time you turn around, you run into it. It's just there. The blessings, the obligations, the failures, the crimes, the neglect, the abandonment of God, all the patterns that Israel followed, we're tracking right down the same track. And so, as we come to the very end time, it should come as no surprise whatsoever that all kinds of prophecies seem to focus on us and what we have done and what we have failed to do. You can argue all you wish about who's Ephraim and who's Manasseh or any other tribe of Israel, but be aware, beware that you don't forget the crucial truth that's contained in all this. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 13. Deuteronomy 8, verse 13. In all your arguments, all your book writings, all of the things that you want to do, and articles and what have you, don't forget this. Deuteronomy 8, verse 13. When your herds and your flocks multiply, when your silver and your gold is multiplied, and all you have is multiplied, that you forget, that your heart be lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God that brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. And he recounts for them all of the pain and the struggle that they went through, and what God had done for them to bring them finally to the place where they were. He said, God fed you with manna in the wilderness which your fathers didn't know, that he might humble you, that he might prove you to do you good at your latter end. Now, here is what we have to watch out for. Beware, lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand has gotten me this wealth. And you have to understand, if you deny that it came from God as a blessing, with obligations attached, then that's where you are. You were saying, well, our power, the might of our hand has built this great nation. It's ours. We brought it to where it is. You shall remember the Lord your God, for he it is that gives you the power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant which he swore unto you by your fathers as it was this day. It shall be that if you do at all forget the Lord your God, at all, and walk after other gods and serve and worship them, whether those gods be leering idols or a BMW or a Mercedes-Benz, I testify against you this day, you shall surely perish. As the nations which the Lord destroyed before you, so shall you perish, because you wouldn't be obedient to the voice of the Lord your God. If we deny that the greatness of our greatness as a people is a gift of God, then we are saying, in effect, my power and the might of my hand has gotten me this wealth. If we deny the obligations that follow the blessings, then we are denying God. It's entirely possible that God, through some means beyond our comprehension, has brought together the children of Abraham upon this continent. Certainly could do it, completely within his purview. After all, he's the one who makes the rules of inheritance, as we have seen. If he wants to pass it down through this line instead of passing it down through that line, God can do that because he makes the rules. It's possible that He did indeed sift us through the nations and finally bring us here to fulfill His purpose. But it's far more than possible that the blessings and the obligations of Israel have fallen on us. It's inescapable. I remember years back when I was looking at the British Israel theory, I never was very impressed with much of the evidence that was presented on it. The thing that continually kept making me focus was not the history of the thing, not the idea of Dan's serpent trail or any of that sort of thing. What kept hitting me was the prophecies in the Bible, which are absolutely inescapable of Israel at the end time. And the typology, that is the imagery and the symbolism of them, fit the English-speaking people like a glove. That, to me, was the dominant thing that made me hold on to it and to look at it. Now, I have said, it's more than possible that these blessings have fallen to us, and we had better not fail. As I've said many times on the air, I am not a prophet, but I can read the prophets. God has not gone away. He has not lost interest. His objectives are the same as they have always been. And He has a people, as He always has had a people, with whom He is going to bless and upon whom He's going to place obligations. And if the blessing and the birthright were taken away once before, they can be taken away again. His purpose will stand. I'll close with the words of John the Baptist in Luke chapter 3, verse 8. Bring forth, therefore, fruits meet for repentance, and begin not to say within yourselves, we have Abraham to our father. There were people who trusted that Abraham is our father. We have direct lineage to Abraham. John said, Luke 3, verse 8, he said, don't say, we have Abraham to our father, for I say unto you that God is able of these stones to raise children to Abraham. And so when you look for the children of Abraham in the modern world who fit the blessings and the obligations God gave Abraham, you're wasting your time trying to chase genetics. Because of the stones, He is able to raise children to Abraham. And now, the axe is laid to the root of the trees. Every tree that brings not forth good fruit is cut down and cast into the fire.